The dog would not go through the gate. The animal control officer had been trying for 11 minutes. He was not unkind. He crouched down. He spoke in a low voice. He extended his hand the way the training said to extend it. The shepherd stood at the entrance of the Claiborne County Animal Shelter in Tazewell, Tennessee, 4 puppies pressed tight against the backs of her legs, and she did not move. Not back. Not forward. She stood at the threshold of the gate with the weight of a dog who has made a decision and is not going to be reasoned out of it, and her eyes moved from the officer to the shelter entrance and back to the officer with a systematic precision that had nothing to do with fear. She had been found that morning by a postal carrier named Dolores Webb on the side of County Road 11, a German shepherd, sable-coated, with the kind of careful, deliberate movement that Dolores, who had a dog of her own, immediately recognized as something beyond a stray. Not lost. Not wild. Positioned, the dog was thin, her ribs visible through her coat. But she moved with a correctness of carriage, head level, gait steady, eyes sweeping the road in both directions, that belonged to an animal with a very specific history. The puppies had been in a shallow depression behind a guardrail. 4 of them, 2 or 3 weeks old by the size of them, eyes just beginning to open. The shepherd had not fled when Dolores stopped. She had looked at her, assessed her, and then looked at the puppies. Dolores had called animal control and stayed until they arrived, which was 35 minutes, during which she had sat on the hood of her mail truck in the October cold and watched the shepherd watch her back. Now the shepherd was at the shelter gate, and she would not go through it. She was not aggressive. She was not retreating. She was holding the line at the threshold the way a trained soldier holds a position, not because she was told to, but because everything in her understood that going through that gate meant surrendering something she had not yet found someone worthy to surrender it to. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Subscribe and stay until the very end, because what this dog was waiting for was already on its way. She simply had to hold the line long enough for it to arrive. Lieutenant Commander Renata Cross was 38 years old and had spent 15 years proving, in rooms that were not always glad to have her, that she belonged there. She was 5'8", lean through the shoulders and long through the limbs, with the kind of physical precision that came not from the gym, but from 2 decades of making her body obedient to her mind in environments where the margin for error was measured in seconds. Her hair was dark and close-cropped. Her eyes a deep, almost black brown that people tended to describe as direct before they found any other word for them. Direct in the way of a person who has decided that the cost of looking away is higher than the cost of seeing clearly. There was a thin, horizontal scar along her left forearm, 2 inches long, white against her brown skin, from a fast rope descent in a training exercise in 2017 that had gone wrong in a way she had corrected before anyone else in the element realized it needed correcting. She did not cover it. It was accurate. She had been the 15th woman to complete basic underwater demolition/SEAL training, BUD-S, when she graduated in 2012, a fact that journalists occasionally led with in the 2 interviews she had given in 15 years, and that she mentioned approximately never, because the number was not the point. The training was the point. What she could do after it was the point. She had served with SEAL Team 8 out of Little Creek, Virginia, 3 deployments to the Horn of Africa, 1 to the Arabian Peninsula, and a classified support rotation in Eastern Europe that her discharge paperwork listed as theater liaison. She had come home from the last deployment 14 months ago with a fractured relationship with stillness and a medical separation she had not wanted and had accepted because the alternative was lying to a flight surgeon, which was not something she was going to do. She was in Tazewell because her grandmother lived there. Nora Cross was 81 years old and had raised Renata after her mother's death, and had never, not once in 15 years of deployments and silence and the particular absences that military service produced, stopped setting a place at the table for Renata's return. Renata had been living in the back bedroom of her grandmother's house on Clinch Mountain Road for 6 weeks, and had been managing the particular disorientation of a person whose entire identity has been organized around a structure that has just been removed. She was not lost. She was between. She was running every morning on the mountain roads and helping Nora with the garden and doing the things she had never been trained for, which was waiting to understand what came next. She had been at the Claiborne County Animal Shelter that Tuesday morning because Nora had read about the shepherd in the county Facebook group. Dolores Webb had posted about it with a photograph and had told Renata over breakfast that someone ought to go check on that poor animal and see that it was being looked after properly. Renata had recognized the construction. Someone ought to go meant Renata ought to go. She had drunk the rest of her coffee and driven the 11 miles to Tazewell. She had arrived to find the officer still at the gate and the shepherd still not through it. She stood at the edge of the parking lot for a moment and watched. She watched the officer's posture, well-intentioned, slightly too direct. The body language of a person trying to solve a problem rather than understand one. She watched the shepherd's eyes, the systematic sweep, the specific weight distribution, the way the dog was not afraid of the entrance, but of what surrendering the entrance would mean. She had seen that posture before, not in animals. In people who had been responsible for something they did not yet know was safe to put down. She walked to the gate. The officer looked up and started to explain the situation. She listened without interrupting, which was one of her most effective habits. When he finished, she nodded and asked him, please, to step back about 15 feet. He did, with the expression of a man who is skeptical but does not have a better idea. Renata Cross knelt down on the asphalt in front of the shepherd. Not to the side, not at an angle. Directly in front of her, far enough that the dog's personal space was intact, close enough that her face was at the shepherd's eye level. She did not extend her hand. She did not make the sounds people make at dogs. She simply knelt and waited and looked. The shepherd looked back. For 8 seconds, nothing happened. Then the shepherd's nose lifted, fractionally, just enough to pull in what the air at this distance carried. And something moved through her body, a single slow wave of recalibration, and her ears, which had been forward and locked, rotated 2 degrees inward, not back. Inward, the difference between vigilance and attention. Renata had seen this before too. Not in animals, in people who had decided to trust something they hadn't planned to trust, registering the decision in their body before their mind had finished making it. She stayed still. She let the dog decide. The shepherd took 1 step forward, then another. She stopped 12 inches from Renata's face and performed the same careful, systematic assessment Renata had seen her perform on the officer. Eyes, hands, posture, whatever else the nose was contributing. And then she did something the officer had not seen her do in 11 minutes of trying. She sat down, and the 4 puppies, freed from the backs of her legs, tumbled forward into the space between her and Renata in the uncoordinated, determined way of creatures who have just discovered that the world beyond their mother's warmth exists and is full of things to investigate. One of them put its paws on Renata's knee. Renata put 2 fingers very gently on the top of its head. She looked up at the shepherd. The shepherd looked at Renata's hand on the puppy. Then she looked at Renata's face. Then she lay down, not in alarm, not in defeat, but in the specific, deliberate way of a soldier who has completed a mission, assessed the handoff, and made the determination that the asset is secure. She put her chin on Renata's knee, next to the puppy's paws. The officer watched from 15 feet away and did not speak, because he understood, in the way that people understand things that do not require explaining, that what he was looking at was not a woman handling a stray animal. He did not have the exact language for what it was. He would think about it for a long time afterward. It was a handoff. Her chip number ran to Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek in Virginia Beach, Virginia, the same installation where Renata had spent 7 of her 15 years. The shelter director, a man named Gil Odom, who had run the Claiborne County facility for 9 years, processed the chip return with the particular focused attention of someone who has learned that military chip numbers require a different set of phone calls than civilian registrations. He called the Little Creek WD liaison that afternoon. The liaison put him through to a master-at-arms chief named Darby, who pulled the record in under 3 minutes. The shepherd's designation was MWD 619S. Her service name was Echo. She had been a patrol and apprehension dog assigned to the Naval Security Force at Little Creek for 6 years before medical retirement 8 months ago. A degenerative condition in her right hip that had reduced her operational reliability without affecting her cognition, her drive, or her capacity for the work she'd spent 6 years learning. The retirement had been classified as honorable. The adoption had been approved and processed. The approved adopter was a man named Wade Garner. A Chesapeake, Virginia address. A contract number. A transfer date 8 months ago. Chief Darby was quiet for a moment after he read the file. "The address," Gil said. "Is it current?" "Not according to what I'm seeing," Darby said. "There's a flag on the record. We opened a welfare check inquiry 6 weeks ago when the quarterly confirmation didn't come in. Nobody answered at the address. We couldn't locate the adopter." Gil Odom had worked animal welfare for 9 years. He had learned not to fill in the gaps in these conversations with assumptions, because the assumptions were almost always smaller than the truth. "How far is Chesapeake from Tazewell?" he said. 6 hours, Darby said. "Give or take. 6 hours. 8 months. An honorably retired military working dog, a litter of puppies born outside the system, and a man named Wade Garner who could not be located at an address in Chesapeake, Virginia." Gil thanked Chief Darby, hung up, and walked out to the kennels, where Echo had been settled with the puppies in a whelping space the staff had put together in an hour. Echo was lying on her side while the puppies nursed, and she raised her head when Gil came in and assessed him in the same systematic way she assessed everything, and then set her head back down, because she had apparently decided he was not a problem. He was going to have to tell Renata Cross. He had asked her to stay. She had gone to the lobby to drink the coffee the front desk staff had brought her, and she had been there for an hour, which told him something about a person, that she was the kind of person who stays. He told her what Chief Darby had told him. She listened with the quality of attention that had nothing performative in it, the way she had listened to the officer in the parking lot, completely, without pre-organizing her response. "Wade Garner," she said when he finished. "Yes, you have a full name, a last known address." "Yes," she was quiet for a moment. "Then, who's doing the welfare inquiry on Echo's end?" Chief Darby said the MWD office. "But with a 6-week lag and no current address, it's going to be slow," Renata said. "Yes." She looked at the coffee cup in her hands. "Is there a foster process while the inquiry runs?" "There is," Gil said. The foster application took 22 minutes to complete. Renata filled it out at the front desk with the same focused efficiency she brought to mission planning documents, which her grandmother would have found amusing and which Renata did not think about. She listed her grandmother's address on Clinch Mountain Road. She listed herself as unemployed, which was accurate, and as a veteran, which she listed without elaboration. Gil approved it before she finished the drive home. Wade Garner was located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 17 days into the Knelt inquiry, by a Naval Criminal Investigative Service agent named Torres, who had been assigned the case after the Little Creek Knelt office escalated it from administrative welfare inquiry to potential adoption agreement violation. Garner had relocated from Chesapeake 6 months ago, 2 months after taking Echo. He had not notified the MNWD program of the move, which was a violation of the adoption agreement. He had not brought Echo with him, which was the worse violation. His account, given to Agent Torres in a South Carolina hotel room that Garner had been living in for 3 weeks, was that he had surrendered Echo to a friend in Roanoke, Virginia, who had agreed to care for her while Garner sorted out his housing situation. The friend in Roanoke had later told him she'd taken Echo to a rural property and that the dog had gotten out. Garner had believed this meant Echo was gone. He had not reported it because he had not known to whom to report it, which was not an excuse, and which Torres's report noted with precision was not an excuse. The chain went: Little Creek to Chesapeake to Roanoke to County Road 11 outside Tazewell, Tennessee, over 8 months, with Echo pregnant and then nursing, and then walking in the October cold at the side of a road 4 puppies behind her. Renata read Torres's summary. Gil forwarded it to her when it came through, and sat with it for a while. She was not a person who required her anger to be visible to be real. She sat with it until it became something more useful than anger, which in her experience was always the right sequence. And then she called Gil and told him what she thought needed to happen next. What she thought needed to happen was a formalized referral for the Roanoke contact, who had released a military working dog onto rural property without notification. A strengthened rescue protocol at Little Creek, requiring the MWD welfare inquiry to be escalated to NYNCIS at 30 days instead of 6 weeks. And a legal review of Echo's adoption transfer, which Renata believed was voidable under the abandonment provision in the adoption agreement. She was not a lawyer. She was a person who had spent 15 years reading contracts under pressure and identifying the provisions that mattered. Gil put her in touch with a veterans' rights attorney in Knoxville named Simone Ikebe. Simone reviewed the adoption agreement in 48 hours and confirmed that the abandonment provision applied and that Garner's transfer of Echo to a third party without program notification was itself a violation sufficient to void the agreement, independent of the subsequent events. Garner's adoption rights were formally terminated 23 days after Torres found him in Myrtle Beach. The formal adoption application for Echo went to the Little Creek MWA program office the same afternoon, submitted by Gil on Renata's behalf with Simone's legal review attached, and with a cover letter from Chief Darby that was, by Gil's account, the most direct piece of bureaucratic correspondence he had received in 9 years of working with military records. The adoption was approved in 11 days. Renata Cross drove to the shelter on a Thursday morning and signed the paperwork at the front desk. She did not say much. She walked to the whelping room and sat on the floor, and Echo came to her immediately. No hesitation, no assessment, no recalibration, and lay against her with the full weight of a dog who has completed the longest part of the waiting and has no interest in doing it again. 3 of the puppies were adopted over the following month, 2 to veteran families in the region, and 1 to a K-9 search and rescue training program in Knoxville that Simone Ikebe put Gil in touch with, because Simone was the kind of attorney who thought about the downstream. The 4th puppy, a female, sable like her mother, with Echo's exact eye movement already legible at 7 weeks, Renata kept. She named her Creek, for Little Creek, for the place where both of them had started. Wade Garner received an official letter of adoption agreement violation and a permanent flag on his record from the MWD program, prohibiting future military animal adoption. The NSYS referral for the Roanoke contact resulted in a misdemeanor citation for unlawful abandonment of a registered animal under Virginia state statute. The Little Creek MNWD Welfare Inquiry Protocol was revised that following spring 30-day escalation to NSYS, as Renata had outlined, replacing the previous 90-day administrative threshold. The revision was implemented across 4 additional naval installations by summer. Simona Shebby sent Gil a note after the protocol revision was announced. It said, "The dog on County Road 11 changed something." Gil put it on the bulletin board in his office, where it remained. 9 months after the Tuesday, in the parking lot, Renata Cross sat on the back porch of her grandmother's house on Clinch Mountain Road and drank coffee in the early dark before her run. October again. The mountain had gone gold and rust in the weeks since the cold came in, and the air had the quality of high places in autumn, thin and exact. The kind that makes everything feel more itself. Echo was in the yard below the porch steps, running the property line with the ground covering, efficient stride of a dog who has recovered her weight and decided that this particular patch of Tennessee belongs to her. Creek sat beside Renata on the step, 7 months old and serious in the way of her mother. The same systematic eye sweep, the same deliberate weight distribution, watching Echo with the focused attention of a student who is not yet sure she is learning fast enough. Nora Cross came out with the coffee pot and refilled Renata's cup without asking, the way she had been doing for 38 years when something needed to be offered without being requested. She stood at the door and looked at the yard. "You found your footing," she said. She did not mean the mountain. Renata looked at Echo running the line. She looked at Creek watching Echo. She looked at her grandmother in the door. "She found it for me," she said. Nora went back inside. Renata drank her coffee. Creek put her chin on Renata's knee and looked up at her with the dark amber eyes that were her mother's eyes exactly, and Renata put her hand on the dog's head and held it there, the way you hold something you did not expect to be given and do not intend to let go of again. The morning opened around them, slow and gold on the mountain. Sometimes the ones who have carried the most are the ones least able to walk through the door. Not because they are weak, because they understand, better than anyone, what walking through a door costs, and they will not do it until they are certain that what waits inside is worth the price of letting go. Echo stood at that gate for 11 minutes, not because she was afraid, but because she was a soldier who had been failed by the people responsible for her, and who had learned that trust is not given to a process. It is given to a person, specifically after assessment, when the evidence supports it. She did not need a rescuer. She needed someone who would kneel down and stay still long enough for her to decide. God does not always send the right person early. Sometimes He makes you hold the line through the cold and the hunger and the November road until the one you are waiting for arrives. And sometimes the one He sends is someone who has also been standing at a gate, not knowing whether what waits on the other side is worth the cost of walking through. 2 creatures at 2 thresholds, finding each other. This is not coincidence. This is the architecture of things arranged more carefully than we can see. Do not rush past the ones who are frozen at the door. They are not refusing. They are deciding. And the decision, when it comes, belongs entirely to them. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to know that waiting is not weakness and that the right person always kneels. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and tell us, have you ever seen an animal choose someone? We read every one, and if you believe that every dog who served deserves someone who will stay, please subscribe so you never miss the next story. May God bless you, protect your family, and give you the patience to kneel and to wait for what is already on its way.